listeners, it's Jackie McGriff, your host on today's Representation in Cinema podcast episode, where we're diving into the film No Other Land. Now, before we get into today's episode, we want to remind folks that you can listen to previous episodes on Spotify or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. You can also learn about our films on our website at ourvoicesproject.com/podcast. If you'd like to be a guest on the podcast, you can email me at info@ourvoicesproject.com. Please note that while we welcome all, we prioritize hearing from Black, Brown, and Indigenous folks, especially since this podcast is about highlighting the films telling authentic and multifaceted stories of Black, Brown, and Native peoples. Now, let's introduce our guest today, Muna Najib. Muna is a first-generation Palestinian social justice activist, writer, speaker, and educator. She has been advocating and teaching about Palestine and other marginalized communities for well over a decade. She is a graduate of University at Buffalo with a degree in English, Third World Literature, and African American Studies. She believes in fighting for full land back for all indigenous peoples, which includes Palestine's full liberation and sovereignty from the river to the sea. Welcome, Muna.
Hello, thank you, Jackie. Salam, everyone. Very happy to be here with you guys today.
All right, thank you, and thank you for being here. Now, let's get on to today's film. So, No Other Land is a documentary that centers Palestinian activist Basel Adra, who records the destruction of his hometown Masafer Yatta in the occupied West Bank by Israeli forces, aiming to turn the area into a military training zone. The film highlights the harsh reality of displacement faced by Palestinians, with Adra documenting the demolitions of homes, schools, and the filling of water wells with cement, all while forming an unlikely bond with Israeli journalist Yuval Abraham, who helps him document his struggle against the occupation. The film is co-directed by Palestinians and Israelis, Basel Adra, Yuval Abraham, Hamdan Ballal, and Rachel Szor. No Other Land was awarded Best Documentary Feature at the Oscars back in February this year and still doesn't have a U.S. distributor. In more recent news, on top of the genocide that continues to unfold in Palestine, perpetuated by the Israeli government and by extension the United States, as well as other Western powers, Hamdan Ballal was attacked by Israeli citizens and is now currently recovering. Israel has continued to bombard Gaza and arm its citizens, terrorizing Palestinians living in the West Bank, including Masafer Yatta, on top of committing many additional war crimes against the Palestinians. Please note that the events in the film happened before October 2023. It's all part of a larger campaign to occupy and ethnically cleanse indigenous Palestinians from their lands. So, if you haven't already watched the film, again, because it's still without a U.S. distributor, you can visit Dog Wolf, that's DOGWOOF.com for links to Sky Store, Virgin Media, and other links to be able to purchase or rent the film to be able to watch for today's discussion. We will also have a link in the show notes if you care to sail the high seas, if you know what I mean. Don't tell anybody. So you can watch the film. But from here on out, we will be discussing the film in depth. So spoilers ahead. And as always, you have been warned. All right. So getting into the discussion, first and foremost, Muna, what were your initial thoughts after watching the film and what immediately came to mind for you?
So, I guess even before watching this film, so like you mentioned, Jackie, unfortunately, this film is not easily accessible. We happen to be fortunate enough to have an independent cinema here in Rochester, so the Little has been amazing at showing this film several times throughout recent months, and they did show it again. They were trying to show, I think, a lot of the Oscar-nominated films before the Oscars, and that was obviously one of them. So they did show it again, and that's when I decided to see it. It was a few weeks before the Oscars. I wanted to make sure that I saw it, right?
Yeah.
Before then. So what were my initial thoughts? Probably it's always more also like a feeling
Mm-hmm.
too. Anytime I um anytime I watch a documentary about Palestine, especially when Palestinians themselves are telling the story,
Right.
um when it's actually happening to them. So in this film, we see Basel and his family and his entire village from the very beginning being driven off of their
Mm-hmm.
land, their home being dispossessed, demolitions happening
Mm-hmm.
in their village, running away from soldiers, armed soldiers who are openly attacking them,
Yeah.
openly attacking them with the cameras in their hand, and especially because they have cameras in their hand,
Mm-hmm.
especially and specifically the Palestinians.
Yep.
Yes, Yuval was there as well. Obviously, he had a hand in documenting what was happening, but it was really, Basil at the forefront of all the danger and him running away from you see that in the documentary, running away from the soldiers, almost getting shot repeatedly,
Mm-hmm.
um, family members of his, people of his family who were shot on camera, documenting that, seeing like the moments where he's, especially when he was like laying on the ground, which is
Mm-hmm.
the front cover of the film, reflecting on his life and, really uncertain what the future holds, if there is a future
Right.
for him, for
Yeah.
his family. Yeah, and that's those like moments of slight despair, really. And when we see that in the film too, when he's having those reflections also with Yuval, there's
Mm-hmm.
moments of that. When Yuval gets to um come to Masafer Yatta and then leave to go back home, Basil obviously doesn't have that option. His family doesn't
Right.
have that option.
Right.
um and as the documentary goes on, it's showing his family being forcibly um their home is taken away and they decide to live in a cave,
Mm-hmm.
basically. That was their it was either that or move to these overcrowded apartment complexes in a
Right.
different area. So they decided they didn't want to do that, and they lived in a cave for some time, including one of his family members that was, and we see that in the film,
Mm-hmm.
who was critically hurt, who was paralyzed from the neck down,
Yeah.
and had no help. And it was really on his family, and I believe it was his mother who is this elder,
Yeah.
and the elders who really had very little help trying to take care of this family member. And it was just them depending on each other, and you see that amongst the family. But yeah, it's not enough.
Yeah.
And I feel like with many of the documentaries, it's always a similar feeling of this frustration,
Mm-hmm.
the sadness, just the knowing that the injustice is happening, and feeling this great, this heavy feeling of just how unfair this is.
Right.
How unfair is it that, Palestinians are so dehumanized that in order to be taken seriously, they have to try and show the world, this extreme violence, including showing actual family members that are dying
Mm-hmm.
on camera, and the response is still very little to none, to
Right.
nothing. And we do see that in the documentary as well.
Right.
Yeah, so it's always this like feeling of, it's necessary to watch these films. It's necessary to know about these people and their stories firsthand.
Mm-hmm.
It's very important, especially considering that Palestinian voices and stories are being erased, have been
Yeah.
erased for so long, for decades. And it, yeah, it's unfortunate. I mean, it's extremely frustrating, especially when you're trying to reach people in the West,
Mm-hmm.
to some degree, because obviously this is being perpetuated by our tax dollars.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
So speaking of reaching reaching folks in the West, I mean, of course, as long as this has been happening, right? There have been Palestinians and, getting their stories out. And there have been people who, um, have been listening. I think but of course it's, as you were saying, like it's not enough. People have the information and they may be telling people, but then it's largely getting suppressed because, of course, it's something that, our government doesn't want other people to know. Um, and then at the same time, um, even when you do have, like, you do have like this mass, I mean, now, like what we're seeing, like with what we're seeing, we are now connected to, um, and unfortunately the number is getting smaller and smaller, but the number of journalists, um who that we are seeing who are still reporting, um
Right. And
even with,
yeah.
yeah, and even, even
Well,
after,
they're getting, well, because they're being
right,
targeted.
because they're
Yeah.
being targeted because of their, yeah,
Hmm.
because of their identity, because of their messaging. um a lot of us, right, who may not have been paying attention before, weren't getting these stories weren't getting through. We're now paying attention. And still with all of this, they still continue to be targeted. Civilians are getting targeted. We're seeing this genocide continue to unfold, with no one seemingly holding them to the telling them to stop or making them stop. Um, and then you have something like the Oscars, right?
Hmm.
Where it's brought before. I mean, if you want to talk about a huge, huge stage, like we're talking about the Oscars, this is how independent film, us as independent filmmakers, like something like that is something that, at least in our mind's eye, or what we've at least been taught, is like, if you can get your story onto this big stage, there's going to be more exposure. There's going to be more people who pay attention to not only the story that you're putting out there, but then also, you as people, you as filmmakers, you as artists, and everything that you do and what you stand for, right? So this, and of course, it's not the only one nominated, not the only Palestinian focused
Yeah.
film nominated, but,
Yeah.
and we'll get into that a little bit
Hmm.
further into the podcast. But I want to go back to the night of the Oscars.
Hmm.
So they're calling nominations for best documentary feature. No Other Land gets called. As soon as you hear as soon as you hear the title, what is going on through your mind when No Other Land was announced?
Yeah. So, and I messaged you that night too, because I knew you were watching. I was watching. I knew you were watching, Jackie, and I was like, you were definitely one of the first people that I thought of. Um, so I think, and you're right. So the Oscars is a mainstream world stage.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
is one of the mainstream world stages. It is Hollywood.
Mm-hmm.
It does feel a little strange, because Hollywood is known, and especially with the Oscars, there is a history there again of, well, if we want to talk about indigenous folks, specifically also with the indigenous folks here,
Yeah.
the indigenous Americans, and their history with Hollywood and their
Right.
erasure, um, their own films also kind of, basically, if you want your film to be seen, or if you want even a spot in a film
Yeah.
as an indigenous person, it comes at a cost.
Right.
I'll just say that. It comes at a cost, and it's not always, people telling their authentic stories from within their own communities. There's
Mm-hmm.
always, it's usually through a colonizer gaze,
Mm-hmm.
through a white gaze, um, and other things as well. It's Hollywood.
Yeah.
It's not always about telling authentic stories per se.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so there is a history of that. I think, okay, so with this specific documentary, and you're right, this is not the first documentary based in Palestine,
Mm-hmm.
and specifically about this quote unquote conflict.
Mm-hmm.
It's an occupation. Let's just be clear.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
it's an occupation. It's not the first. We've had we had the last documentary that was nominated, which was Five Broken Cameras, which was another family that it was another filmmaker, and he was documenting his own experience with his family, and who was also facing danger because he was documenting and filming his experiences in Palestine. And same with No Other Land. The only one of the main differences, though, with No Other Land is that it is co-directed with Israeli directors,
Yeah.
right? And that comes with its own, you know, um, criticisms, and also just it does make you wonder, well, is that what it sort of takes for a film like this to win an Oscar? So like that was one of the questions.
Right.
But like back to your question, what was, I guess, my feelings or thoughts? I mean, I was surprised it won. I was, part of me, I mean, I was surprised that it actually won the Oscar. That okay, this is going to be interesting. That was my second thought.
Yeah.
We're going to have these two young men who, one Palestinian and one who identifies as Israeli, who put this together, and now we're going to see what they have to say.
Yeah.
And it's, yeah, and I could also kind of tell within the audience, who was happy and who was kind of like, maybe kind of giving second glances. And we also kind of like, we saw Selena Gomez on stage and having a little side chat with Samuel L. Jackson. We all kind of wonder what that was about, and it was that was a little distracting, but I'm like, okay, what are they thinking?
Right.
That's what I'm thinking. I'm like, what are they thinking? What are they saying? Because we do have, those celebrities, and whether they spoke out or once spoke out and then took it back, and you have all that sort of thing going on too. So there's like layers there. All in a matter of like this 3-minute little speech on the Oscar stage. And then finally, when the 4 people that went up there to accept the award, and it was only Yuval and first it was Basel who spoke to accept the award. And I think the fact that Basel did say in his end of the speech, I hope that the world can recognize that Palestinian ethnic cleansing needs to stop. It needs to end. And that he basically said, he has a baby girl now, and he doesn't want her to grow up in the same way that he's had to grow up. And I think that sentiment, a lot of Palestinians say that and feel that way, rightfully so.
Right.
Everything he said completely, I think, I think a lot of Palestinians feel that way. He didn't say the word genocide or anything like that. Which is interesting. But also, like, you got to understand too, like, you could tell English is his second, he's not fluent in English. You could tell he was trying to really get his words out and words across. So I was very proud of him it's a brave moment for him,
Yeah.
And then when we heard Bassett, and then when Yuval comes in, I was not crazy about his end of the speech, and many, I think, Palestinian people within the diaspora and otherwise, I think a lot of people, want to see this as a win, right? I get it.
Yeah.
Because the Oscars is, like we said, like it's a main stage, it's a world main stage, and we don't want to just like completely discount this, but Yuval, first of all, when he talks about how they are unequal and stuff, which is true in the sense that yes, the way that their lives, the way that they're living their lives, and what I think what's being forced upon Basil is not what's being forced upon Yuval. And also, like, they're just, it's still, I think the way that he contextualizes things, and as far as from his experience, and I think his idea of making things better moving forward, I don't completely agree with, because I believe in whole and complete land back, like from the river to the sea. this is an occupation, by an occupier
Yeah.
over the occupied.
Right.
It's not a two-side story.
Mm-hmm.
We keep reiterating. We shout into the void. This is not a two sides narrative. And I think you know, with his speech, it's still, there is this sort of two sides,
Yeah.
two equal-ish, maybe not totally equal, but still this two sides, and we can coexist just as so long as, the government changes a little bit, whatever the case. And also, he states that the United States is blocking that path. Well, the United States isn't just blocking it, it's perpetuating it.
Mm-hmm. Right.
It's not blocking it, it's the cause of
Mm-hmm.
it.
Right.
Um, and I know that's probably, given the time that we're living in and with everything that's happening, that might be like a controversial thing to say, but it's the truth.
Mm-hmm.
That is the truth. And yeah, and also bringing up, the hostages before the word Gaza was not mentioned,
Yep. Yeah. Yep. Yep. Yep.
So
Yep.
again, and we've talked about this, Jackie,
Yep.
in another event about the dominant narrative, dominant narrative versus the narratives that are unheard, untold. And again, the dominant narrative is usually by those who have power, by those who have colonized, by those who still have and wield the power.
Yeah.
And they may, want to be a more, how can I put this, generous colonizer or a kinder colonizer. But at the end of the day, you're still occupying land and living on land that you are illegally settled on. It is not your land. And I
Right.
think his idea again is, he says, like, we're intertwined. Well, intertwined in what way? Because if Yuval is trying to say that he and Basel are like of the same roots and
Mm-hmm.
lineage,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
that's not true at all.
Right.
That's just factually not true. Um, one person's lineage is from that land, and historically speaking, and in every other way, and the other group of people are not,
Mm-hmm.
and they have settled there. Their grandparents and great grandparents are not from there. That is a fact. That's not
Mm-hmm.
an opinion. So intertwined in what way? Well, again, it's because of an occupation
Mm-hmm.
that's happening, that's been happening.
Right.
And it's because of that occupation that, again, Gaza was not mentioned. The
Mm-hmm.
hostages were mentioned. Gaza was not. That what we're seeing in Gaza has been, unfolding. It's nothing new, but unfolding in like the worst possible way
Right.
now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, I guess then for this, because there's so much, there's so much within that, right? There's the understanding of the history of Palestine. It's understanding also too what indigeneity means.
Mhm.
With as far as like the people saying, well, they have ties to the land. Regardless of whether or not you have ties to the land, there's a difference, right, between having some sort of, I don't even want to say, and I'm not even sure if I should use the word tie, but when you say, being indigenous to the land, and of course, like I understand it in the context of our indigenous mentors that we have here that are indigenous to Turtle Island. So for those of you who don't know, Turtle Island refers to not only the United States, but then also Canada and Mexico. If you look at a map of North America, it looks like a turtle, so they refer to it. It is Turtle Island. But going back and like having conversations with a lot of our indigenous leaders here, and mentors, the way they explain indigeneity and what it means to be indigenous to the land is that the land is part of you and you are part of the land. There is no separating the two. You are both, it's this not only just like a relationship, but you're
Yeah,
connected. Yeah.
it's a soul tie. I
Yeah.
mean, it's a physical. It's obviously but it's very much a much deeper thing than just occupying land. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
when you see a people that are willing to care for the land and then die for the land to preserve it. That's how you know those people are of that land, versus people who come and settle on it and want to extract from it. And then if one thing goes wrong, or if there's any sign of danger, usually perpetuated by their own colonizer, perpetuated by, you know, those that are taking the land away, not usually the other way around. They run, they flee, they don't risk, you know, they don't have this tie to those places in the same way. They will run for their life, which is a normal human response when your life is in danger. But when you are when you're from a place, you know, your entire lineage is from that place, and also you don't really see yourself going anywhere else. I mean, it's a completely different it's a completely different thing. It's a completely different relationship, you know, with the land, and also the people around you. I mean, the Palestinians are very close to their families as well. You're talking about generations of people, a lot of people just, you know, trying to live normal lives. They're normal people, you know, trying to raise their children and go to school and go to work and, you know, worship on, if they're Christian, go to church. If you're Muslim, go to the mosque. Normal things. You know, but that's really, I think, the difference. One of the main differences is that you're not going to just, even for any amount of money, you're not just going to give up your home. You're not.
We're constantly thinking about, you know, who does the story center, right? Like that's why our Voices Project started. That is why we have this podcast, Representation in Cinema. You know, we're talking about stories that center Black, Brown, Indigenous peoples. And so when I think about No Other Land, it's a story that's centered on Palestine, centered on Palestinians. And this is a film that, you know, as we both mentioned, you know, is co-directed by both Palestinians and Israelis. And it's the first Palestinian-centered story that won at the Oscars. As if to say that Palestinian stories are only legitimate if you put them alongside an Israeli. And so how do you feel about that implication that Palestinian voices only gain legitimacy or recognition on a global stage when paired with Israeli ones, the oppressors in this scenario? How do you hold that tension?
Well, so I'm actually also thinking of, and I'm remembering that, the Emmys, the journalist who won. Oh my God, help me out, Jackie. I'm having a brain block.
Oh no! Wait, okay, sorry. It was for the Emmys. Who won? Was it I'm sorry.
Okay, we're gonna have to cut.
No, you're fine. No, don't. We can figure this out. We're gonna figure this out.
No, I know this. I'm just having a brain block. Anyway, so I'm really wondering if it's also in the moment, because of this moment that this film won. You know,
so the journalist appears to be Bisan Uda.
Oh
Bisan.
yes.
Okay,
Bisan.
Bisan.
Yeah,
we should know this.
Well, no,
the
you
Queen
said,
Bisan.
Oh, okay,
Yes.
I'm sorry. I forgot that.
Thank you.
No, I forgot that she had won an Emmy, because I'm like, okay, well, what is that supposed to do for her though?
And she says it. She's like, okay, thank you for the Emmy win. Can we now free Palestine? You know, can we have our land back? Can our people live? You know, what are we supposed to do there? And they do deserve all of these awards, because honestly, Palestinians, especially and we're not even talking about people who are professional journalists. You don't have to have a press vest on. They're all with their phones, with whatever handheld device that they have. They are recording, you know, everything that's happening to them, that's happening to everyone around them. if it was not for them documenting this genocide, we would not know the half
Right.
of everything that's been happening. And that's really the main reason why it is the most documented genocide
Yes.
to date.
Right.
Because of them, and obviously we live in a time of social media too, but still they're being censored left and right, and that's also by design. But this is the most documented genocide ever,
Right.
and it is because of them. So it's, I guess, back to the question of, are these stories seen as more legitimate when I guess it's paired with an Israeli, or maybe like an American, or someone who is not Palestinian,
Right.
basically. I mean, to a degree, I think that definitely makes it more of the story that I think, especially in Hollywood, and people want to, they want to envision a future where coexistence is still possible, between the quote two sides, and somehow there is a possibility for that it'll just work out. Well, Palestinians have tried that many times, and they've tried nonviolent protests, many types of nonviolent protests, and so and all other avenues to gain their rights,
Right.
and their dignity, and all of these things. But every single time it's been met with more violence from the other side, and more land grab, and ethnic cleansing, and genocide. So it's not that Palestinians haven't tried. I mean, a lot of times it's been sort of put upon them by the greater imperial powers. They're not really asked. They're not really asked about their own futures. It's more of what other entities and powers want, and are trying to do with them. Figure out like the right solution, but it never pans out because those in power never keep up their end of the bargain anyway. So there's that. I mean, here's the thing. That's nice. The Oscars, great, woohoo. I'm also thinking of, Sacheen Littlefeather, who decided to
Yes.
not
Yes.
accept the Oscar
Right.
on behalf of gosh, I can't remember his name.
No, yep, and I just forgot it too. No, but it's she goes up to, is it Marlon Brando?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, yeah, in his stead,
And he
so
was very critical, of Hollywood stances when it
Yeah.
comes to indigenous folks and things like that.
Right.
But he could be without consequence because he was Marlon Brando. And she faced a lot of backlash for that. And she was just the messenger.
Right.
She was literally just the messenger up on a stage as a young woman, saying on behalf of Marlon Brando, he declines to accept this award because of, et cetera, because of the treatment of indigenous folks and portrayals that, go against their principles and things like that. And she was basically, booed and punished for it. So I keep that in mind. Would it have been an interesting, like plot twist, like if they went up there and they were like, we're not going to accept this award because Hollywood and the Oscars and all of is like doesn't really mean much, and this genocide is still going on, and very little has actually been done about like real action taken to stop this.
Right. Yeah.
And obviously Hollywood is very much a component in the silencing, and also like perpetuating this, really, in many ways. I mean, we can talk about like the media and like films and the portrayal of Palestinians specifically, but like, people of the Middle East, there's all that, but like just celebrity and celebrity culture, and how many celebrities have tweeted point blank that they support the genocide. We have had that. and not much, pushback is given or anything like that. So, and we do have people who are in support of it, and they um they're punished or silenced for that too. But like they have the privilege to
Right.
do it. They
Yeah.
have the privilege to do it. They're all part of a mainstream world stage. Like if you have that power and privilege, like you have a responsibility.
Yes.
So
Yes.
I don't believe celebrities are going to be our saviors or save the world or any,
Right.
but they do have a responsibility.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely. I want to, so again, like talking
I hope that
about.
answered the question.
Oh no,
By the way. I'm
absolutely.
like
You answered the
thinking,
question. You went
okay, because
above and beyond,
okay.
Muna. Answered the question.
Yeah, there's so many great, by the way, like this is why I'm like, there's better documentary. I mean, this is a good documentary. It's an authentic, it comes from an authentic place, at least definitely from like Basil's family and his side. But this has been happening in every part of Palestine. Masafer Yatta is a smaller village. It's been happening everywhere. There's tons of great, authentic, heartbreaking, documentaries that will never see, a red carpet, and that's okay. 'Cause that's not the point. But, and some are more easily available than others now. Janine is one of many that comes to mind, which is available online and you can watch. And that was around the invasion of Jenin in 2002, and the people who were massacred during that time. And Jenin is known as, it's a very important spot in Palestine where resistance does happen, and there's a lot of young people who, are risking their life to, help their people.
Yeah.
And yeah. So,
well, and what does it mean to you to see so many Palestinians stepping into this role of storyteller or being their own journalists? I know we talked a little bit about this before. I mean, we talk about it all the time, but but we talked about it specifically about how you're seeing so many, even if they don't have like a press badge on, or press vest, I should say, on, there's still lots of Palestinians out there, like just with their phones, talking about what's going on, talking about what's happening to them. How does it feel for you? Or what does it mean to you to be seeing that, right? So many Palestinians telling their own story, even if it never, like, again, sees, the red carpet or any grand stage.
Yeah, no, it's incredibly important. I think our original storytellers before, again, phones and cameras were easily available to anyone. I'm thinking of my grandparents, my great grandparents, just sitting. I remember. I mean, all my grandparents have passed at this point, but sitting down with my grandmother, who has like the memory of an elephant and can recall all of her stories, like growing up, or stories of family members, and she would take joy in just having us sitting around her grandkids, and her just talking and sharing, like how, sharing her own stories. She really delighted in that, and I wish I had a camera during the times, the few times that like I had that, with her, so that I could have more of an archive or document something, um yeah, I feel like it comes naturally in a lot of ways. Our people are just, they're storytellers to begin with. It's a part of, oral history is a big part of our culture to begin with, besides actual journalism. But now, when it comes to journalism, and again, telling our stories and also getting the right news from the right sources, yeah, it's incredibly important, again, because there's so much misinformation and so much erasure. And that's why many of our journalists are being targeted. They are being targeted, and it's horrible, and it was, gosh, the last journalist who was targeted and killed. I'm forgetting all the names today. It's so bad. Or no, we're gonna have to look him up because it's important. But he basically was stating, he's like, we don't need the West or Western journalism to tell our stories. We're here and we're telling our stories, and it's true. They're doing an incredible job, and they're doing it in the most dangerous, you know, place to do it, and they're still doing an incredible job. They are at risk every day, but I don't think that they want anyone else to. I think they want people to pay attention and to care and to do their part.
Right.
You know, they want change to happen, but it's not about giving the narrative or the mic or whatever just to anybody. You know, they're more than capable of telling their own stories and documenting everything that's been happening.
So it looks about a week ago, and this was an editor with Palestine Today, Ahmed Mansour, and his coworker Hilmi Al-Faraki.
Thank you. Yeah, and he made sure that it was known before he was killed that that it's it's a responsibility, but there's another layer and level to it, you know, because they're being targeted so heavily. And nothing is being done about it. And you know, it's very telling, and it's specifically Palestinian journalists. If we're talking about the journalists, it's specifically them with their press vests on. And, you know, it doesn't matter. They are not protected. Yeah.
It just makes me think of, I mean, just constantly getting up in the morning, and it's probably not the best thing to do, but opening to social media in the morning and seeing a post from Basan saying, "Hello, this is Basan. I'm still alive." That sentence alone, I'm just like, there's all the evidence. You know, you said like it's the most documented, which it is. It's the most documented genocide we're seeing, and there's all this documentation just constantly coming out of what's going on, and you know, it's all out there in the open, and it's just like at some point you're thinking at some point like somebody has got to do.
Well, no one else can do. I mean, it's a lot. I mean, we've all seen the images over the past year and a half. You know, it is too much.
Right.
It's too much. But I don't see. I don't see any other, you know, folks around the world. I'm sure that maybe there's people who might be inclined to like go to Gaza to do the reporting. But it's not. I don't think it's possible in the way that they have been able to report. In the way that they have been, you know, been able to report it. And yes, it's visceral, and it's violent, and it's heartbreaking. It's devastating. But I don't feel. I would feel very sensitive just as a person from the diaspora, you know, giving that responsibility just to any journalist, especially mainstream journalism is not it. You know, our Western outlets they are extremely corporate and biased. That is a reality. So we have to lean on and depend on those who are doing the hard work of telling the authentic news, stories, etc., all of those things. And also these journalists are very close to their people. It's not going to be the same thing, you know, from an outsider's perspective. It just isn't. There's more of an intimacy there. There is a professionalism aspect, but there's definitely more of an intimacy there. And I'll give an example, right? Like when Gazans by the thousands were going back to the north because there was during the ceasefire, the so-called ceasefire.
The so-called ceasefire, yes.
You know, and they were, and it was incredible seeing the thousands of people on foot walking back to, you know, I mean, they know that their homes are gone, their families have perished, but they're going back to their land, to their place. They're very grateful to be able to trek back. Um, the journalists that were, in the midst of those people stopping and to talk to them or to get, a word from them, it was a celebration for everyone. Like, it wasn't just like, hey, can we just stop? We're going to do this professional interview. Okay. So just like, look here and do this and do. It's not like that. The journalists are very much part of the people. So the people were cheering and hugging, running up, hugging them, hugging the journalists. The journalists are hugging them. Very congratulatory. A man, like, I remember he ran towards one of the journalists and just like embraced him, gave him this big hug, and he started sobbing. And the man who was reporting, he just kept saying like alhamdulillah salama, which just means like, congratulations to your homecoming, like God bless you, God bless you. You're not going to get that from anyone else. It's not the same. It's not the same as just corporate news at all. It gives you that. It restores that humanity that I think that from any other outlet constantly tries to take away from the Palestinians and their experience and their stories in every way. So just to even have a little bit of that humanity restored is so important. It's so important because besides the actual physical violence that's being forced on them, it's very violent to the ways that they've been dehumanized and erased is just as violent. It's very violent too.
Yes.
So it's extremely important. Yeah.
I am thinking about, so in what you're saying about, dehumanization and the way in which Palestinians are being portrayed and have been portrayed. We're and it's important that we see what's happening, we see what's going on, and as difficult as it is, imagine what it's like for Palestinians on the ground, and at the same time also to see, because not only is it they're being genocided, but then also a lot of what makes a person human, like you said, dehumanizing. A lot of the dehumanization that's going on top of everything else is also, schools have been destroyed, hospitals, places of worship. A lot of their, we're over here, at least like within the movement, hearing a lot from Palestinian poets and singers and artists and revolutionaries. And to also, like, you said something before, I think it was even outside of this conversation, but saying something not only to, like, again, bringing all that and what I just said, but then also like not seeing or portraying Palestinians as victims either, and being very careful to do that.
Having that very black and white sort of categorizing them or view of them as either villain or victim or these people without agency, and it's just the outside world trying to make all of these decisions for them as though they don't have a clue, what they want and how they envision their sovereignty, their safety, their futures for themselves, for their families, for their children, but every time they try, it's again, it's forcibly taken from them in one way or the other. So yeah, that's why, I mean, for me, and Jackie, you know me well enough now that's why I can be maybe sometimes a little bit annoying about centering Palestinian voices, and I don't mean it in
not
the
annoying
sense,
at all. Not
I
at
don't,
all.
and I'm not even talking about myself per se, although like y'all, like I've heard plenty of speakers, and some people are very they have the heart and they have some of the knowledge, and we need as many people to care about this issue as possible. 100%.
Yes.
And to speak out with your family, with your colleagues. Like it's a necessary thing. It's not just if you're a Palestinian, like do this, and if you're not, do that. That's not what we're saying. But but again, it is the reality that Palestinians, whether we're talking about, in the New York Times, like, again, mainstream news, Hollywood films, they are not really allowed or given space to tell it how it is, how they feel, what they
Yes.
want.
Right.
They're not given that. And again, every time they try, they're just met with more silencing, more censorship.
Yes.
We see that on social media. We see it everywhere. So yeah, that's why it's crucial when I say that. I'm like, it's not even Palestinians within the diaspora. It's really them, the ones who have been displaced, who are like in the intense and still being bombed intense.
Yes.
What is, what needs to happen? What needs to happen in order for this to stop? And even going back to the term ceasefire, being such a controversial term, right?
Yeah.
The term ceasefire is seen as controversial here, specifically here in America, in the West, because it's being done to the Palestinians.
Right. Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
Really. So.
So, and then also too, so when we're talking about, again, and you actually answered one of my next questions, which was going to be, what as, regular citizens, as artists and everything, what could we be doing? And so what I'm hearing is constantly sharing about and centering, right, Palestinian voices and, sharing their stories, sharing what's going on. As far as that goes, what is it that let's start with films, because of course we're on a movie podcast and we're talking about representation in cinema, and we talked about No Other Land, and then going even further into depth about Palestinian films, again, Palestinian centered stories. What are other recommendations that you have as far as Palestinian stories?
So like I said, there's so many. People can obviously do their own research, but I can recommend a couple of websites. You can go on palestinefilms.org. There's the Palestine Film Institute.org. I found another website. If you just Google films about Palestine, more recommendations also come up. And also we do have Witness Palestine, which runs a film festival every year in November, right here in Rochester, right? And if you can go on their website, wpff.us. And yeah, you'll definitely have all types of recommendations towards great documentaries, films, fiction-based films as well. They exist. They're out there. You just have to do a little bit of research. Off the dome, like, I'm trying to think. Gosh, I don't. So like, I know more recently, I guess a more fun recommendation. I mean, if you haven't watched the show Mo on Netflix, watch it. I feel like it's a good watch, and it is loosely based on his actual life and things that he's been through as a Palestinian American, and his problems with trying to get a visa and like family issues and things like that. And I think the show did a pretty good job of showing that connection to homeland, especially when you're part of the diaspora and what that means, and especially if you haven't been there in a very long time. So I mean, we have more options than we used to. So it's just about like finding them, and I think it's I still want to see things that I think have not been made yet. I again, all of the documentaries, like, from authentic voices from Palestinians telling their stories, is very important. We have a lot of heaviness out there. A lot of these documentaries are hard to watch. I'd like to see more stories being told, more like Arab writers and Palestinian writers, coming up with their own screenplays, more of that. We have it. We have people who are doing all kinds of things, but I want to see more of that and more of it being supported.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, pulling focus out. I have to use a camera reference because of course. But pulling out of focus even more, like it is so for our listeners, if you're listening, we're recording this in the middle of April, which is Arab Heritage Month. And while we are like talk about Arab representation, 365 and 366 on a leap year, um since that is more usually when you're inside of like these heritage months, people are more apt to pay attention. So there's a film that Muna you had suggested, basically like kind of like a one-on-one on how Hollywood has and continues to perpetuate stereotypes around about Arabs. And what is that film? And tell us about it.
Yes. Thanks for asking, Jackie. Can you guys tell we've had these conversations before? But I'm glad we get to share it with you guys today. So yeah, a very important documentary, and it's it's easily available because it's on YouTube now. It's a 50-minute documentary called Real Bad Arabs. Real as in film reel. Bad Arabs. And it's based on a professor, Jack Shaheen, his book by the same name, who is no longer with us, but it does a really great job. And I would hope to actually see like a part 2 of this sort of documentary, but it does a really great job of highlighting how Hollywood films have maligned and villainized, the portrayal of the Arab, basically this exotic or villainous thing that's not really real.
Right.
All of the stereotypes that you can think of that, is supposed to represent the Arab on film, or like a loosely Muslim type of figure, something like that. Whether they know whether they're Muslim or not. I don't. Yeah, the stereotypes that surround those identities that have existed in Hollywood films for a very long time, and sort of highlighting that, and trying to educate people on that this has been going on for so long. And I think we don't, I think like the American psyche just got used to it, doesn't question it.
Oh, for sure.
For so long. It's these films that we grew up on. And a lot of it is propaganda, obviously, but a lot of it is war propaganda as well. It's a whole other thing. But yeah, Real Bad Arabs. Do yourself a favor if you have not watched it. I believe it's a must watch. I think that they should show this documentary actually more widely in the education system. Yeah, and I wish I had more suggestions. There is a film right now on Netflix called The Mauritanian. That film is based on the true story of a man who was held in Guantanamo for like 14 years. Was never charged with anything.
Wow.
Like most of the men who were held in Guantanamo. But it's based on his memoir called Guantanamo Diaries. His name is Mamadou Slahi, Mamadou Slahi. Yeah, so it's based on his memoir. And I was really I recommend that. It's on Netflix. I'm glad that they made that film. I think that at least it tries. It doesn't really show, I think, everything, but it really tries to tell more of the accurate story of that time, and of that those practices that were put upon people, certain men of the like Middle East area post 9/11. So yeah.
And so I will, let's see, the last really short questions, because of course we don't believe in small talk here. It's all just like deep conversation. And we tend to go on like seriously, if we could make a podcast 2 hours, don't tempt us. But it easily becomes it easily could become that. But we won't do that to you, Chris. And to our listeners as well. So
Part 2 coming up.
yeah, exactly. There you go. So do you have Muna any like upcoming I'll start with this, like, do you have any shout outs? Because I know we had like also talked about this. We talk about we prepare a lot, and we're constantly having these conversations anyway, but are there any shout outs that you want to give, to anyone who is also doing this work, or just general shout outs?
Yeah. Well, first shout out to you, Jackie.
Oh, thanks.
And Our Voices Project. Check them out, guys. Telling those authentic voices and
I did
narratives.
not tell her to say that. I did not tell her, just so y'all know.
No, she didn't. It was all me. So no, definitely shout out to you, Jackie, because you have been such a support, and I really believe in I think what you're trying to do out here, and I think like our voices do need to be heard, like different, authentic, marginalized voices, but it's hard to do in safe spaces, to find safe spaces to do that.
Yep.
So I think it's I know it's not always easy, but I see you, and I think like it's very important work. So always happy to be a part of anything you do. So shout out to you, girl. I want to give a shout out to the Little Theater, because they do continue to show films that I think other cinemas just don't or won't show.
Yeah.
I think that they really do try, and they do listen to the folks, and they have supported the Palestine Film Festival for a long time now. So I think that's worth mentioning.
They've got 2 movies coming up. So there's The Foragers. That's on the 16th
this week.
This week. And then, because I believe that one's centering Palestinian farmers.
Something like that.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then Chris is looking it up. And then there's also the encampments that was actually just announced.
Yeah.
And now, while it's not, it's on the student movement, so it's more about that. But of course, the encampments were a way for students to get the word out about what was happening, or what is happening in Gaza and in the West Bank as well.
So, the largest student movement in history.
Yeah. That's out. So the encampments is out, at least here in Rochester, at the Little Theater on May 2nd and 3rd. And I'm not being paid to say this. I'm just a fan. We're just fans here of the Little, but also because I know that folks at the Little listen to the show. Please show Real Bad Arabs, because it's so good. You were talking about that film, and there is so much that
we're gonna know. We have to do another.
Yeah, we'll have to do another podcast about that one for sure. Absolutely.
Looks like you can also get that on Canopy and support your local library at the same time. So you can use your library card and watch it through Canopy.
Ooh, wait, is that
Real Bad Arabs?
That's Real Bad Arabs. Okay, gotcha. Awesome. Okay. And to close us out, Muna, any final thoughts just about the movie, anything we've talked about, anything that we haven't talked about, like final thoughts?
I just want to say, I appreciate anyone who has been doing at the work, advocating, going to protests. There's a lot of people out there who have been taking the time, just their own time, on this issue, and who I know do care a great deal, and sometimes they feel unseen, but trust that like it's always appreciated, and no act is too small. I do hope that our community can continue doing that work, and also can come together and get stronger and get braver, because we have to get real brave, especially now, given everything, given not just this administration, but the fact that this is not over. It's not over. unfortunately, we have a ways to go. Palestine will be free,
Mm-hmm.
God willing, sooner rather than later, but we still have work to do. And so, whatever ways that we can help support one another to keep each other safe, but also, do this important work, because yeah, the liberation of the Palestinians means liberation for so many other people.
Indeed. Thank you so much, Muna, for sharing, for being on the podcast today, for sharing your insight, for sharing your heart, your knowledge. For our listeners, we will put all of the recommendations, as well as the upcoming movies and the shout outs that Muna gave in the show notes. So please go and look those up. I want to say thank to our listeners again. Thank you so much for your support of Our Voices Project and our Representation in Cinema podcast. You can find us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and Blue Sky, and at ourvoicesproject.com for more information about what we do. You can sign up for our newsletter there, too, to be the first to get notifications about podcast episodes and new film projects. You can listen to this episode and others under Representation in Cinema on any of the platforms listed on our website, like we said, with Spotify, anywhere where you listen to your favorite podcasts, and also on our website at ourvoicesproject.com/podcast. This has been Jackie McGriff, your host for this episode of Representation in Cinema of Our Voices Project. Thank you again for listening.